Hey, I'm Kev Mr. Kerr, and the 2015 IndyCar Series season is right upon us now as the traditional series opener around the streets of St. Petersburg in Florida happens this weekend. So we are going to be looking ahead to 15 rounds to over 20 drivers with around 10 teams all season long racing, and a couple of one-off appearances at the Indy 500 as well. And this season has been very long in the waiting. There's been an abnormally large off-season since the end of August, when the last round of the 2014 season happened at night when no one was watching on the Fontana over in California, to this season opener this weekend. 7 long months for the teams, the drivers, and of course the fans as well. And for the series, there's been some hype building for this season. There's been one major change for this season. After years of waiting, the Aerokits have finally come. So, Aerokits, they've been discussed since the DW12 came about. They were actually originally meant to come along with the car, but they've been delayed. Randy Bernard went delayed, and now they're finally here in 2015. In an unusual route, it's the engine suppliers providing the Aerokits, Honda and Chevrolet, and they're going to be providing them to their teams. And on the car, they can only develop in 5 areas of the car. There's 2 areas around the front wing, around the side pods as well, and the under tray, and then around the rear wing and the back of the engine cover as well. And we've seen Honda use almost every area, while Chevrolet's gone for a slightly different route. So at least the cars will be distinguishable between each other, and you'll be able to recognise a Honda car from a Chevrolet car. So at least that's provided a bit of a different identity for each driver, for each manufacturer at least, and it's not looking like a spec series anymore. To explain this better, I've linked a video in the description below, and should hopefully be annotated on the screen as well, of Nick Wirth, who you may recognise as a designer with SimTech, with Benetton and with Virgin in recent years in F1. Well, his design company designed the Honda Aerokit, and he explains how they went about their philosophy for the Aerokit and how they went about designing it in these different areas in a 7-minute long video. So hopefully you can click on that, and he will explain it better than I could ever do. And these Aerokits will hopefully provide some competition during the season, as well as they can develop these parts during the year, and the teams can pick and choose which components they want to put on their cars. And of course, the interesting thing about IndyCar is that they don't just run on road and street courses. There are going to be oval Aerokits as well, and it'll be fascinating to see how different the Aerokits are on the ovals compared to the road and street courses, and how they're going to be changing and evolving during the season depending on which course they're driving on, how they develop these kits as well. But the main thing about the Aerokits though is it is great for IndyCar. So why is this great? Well, competition between Honda and Chevrolet. Yes, they're the engine suppliers, and they actually went down different routes when the engines first came about in this DW12 era a few years back, with on one side a single turbocharger V6 unit and the other a twin turbocharged V6 unit. But after a year, a twin turbocharged V6 unit was the mandatory requirement, and so the engine side has kind of been closed off on that competition side. But with these Aerokits now and the different philosophies between Honda and Chevrolet, which is quite apparent in their Aerokits, we will see some creative ideas. It's a fresh competition for them, and it is going to be fascinating to see how this competition arises during the season as they go down different development routes on their Aerokits, and how differently they see as such the oval aero from each other, and of course the road and street course aero as well, and how they will differently get that airflow to the back of the car and get all this downforce on this car. And it'll be fascinating to see. It's something that we see in F1 all the time now, and now we're going to see it in IndyCar as well this season. While the aerodynamic development is only between 2 manufacturers in IndyCar compared to over half a dozen constructors in F1, it is just nice to see aerodynamic development come back to IndyCar and American open wheel racing after quite a few years away. Has IndyCar has kind of been stuck in this spec series route since the DW12 has come along. Yes, the engine suppliers have been different, but as I said, it's a very closed off area of development now with the Aerokits, we've got quite visual, differences between the teams and the manufacturers as well. And of course, the teams can pick and choose which components they want. So there might be differences between how the teams, choose the components they want on their car every race weekend. So it is just nice to see aerodynamic development back, as that's something I quite enjoy in F1, going to every race weekend and seeing if a team has put a little part here, a little part there, and something they will change on the car. Now we can look forward to that in IndyCar every race weekend, and looking at what the manufacturers have bought, looking at what the teams will choose as well. And I'm sure Marshall Pruitt, the racer, tech guru, and we'll post some pictures on Twitter of all the different parts, that Honda and Chevrolet bring, and different parts maybe between the different teams as well. But it's nice to see aerodynamic development back in American Open race, and these cars have been, compared to the F1 2008 cars. Well, they're not as hideous as those cars, and it's kind of hideous how boxed in the aerodynamic development is, and it could become hideous as the season goes along. But it will be just nice to have something else to follow during the season, not just the teams and drivers, but this kind of aerodynamic development with these Aerokits as well. Of course, with these Aerokits giving more aerodynamics to the cars, they give them more downforce and make the cars go faster around the circuits. And we're not just talking about a second or two, we're talking seconds faster around the circuit, as we saw at the Barber test last week. And that would be great to see, seeing times rival such the Champ Car times from almost a decade ago now. And yeah, that should be great to see these cars really go fast around the road in street courses and maybe on the ovals as well. Of course, there are criticisms for this Aerokit, and one suggestion has been that these Aerokits weren't the way we were meant to go. We were meant to give more engine power to these cars to make it more exciting and better, rather than going down this aerodynamic route. And certainly F1 has seen that in recent years, with about 6 years ago now, they totally reset it on the aero side, and they haven't given them more engine power, but they totally changed how those F1 cars looked 6 years ago. Could IndyCar run into that problem down the road? Certainly, and that's one of my worries of these Aerokits for this season, kind of diluting the racing a bit, as for the past few years we've seen some wheel bang, and we've seen some crazy stuff in IndyCar. Will drivers have to drive more carefully now, because hitting off one of these aero bits will cost them tenths of a second per that, cost them quite a lot of points of downforce, and really affect how their car handles now. And of course, maybe they can't follow the car in front much closer. That was a problem actually on ovals last year, watching the front end wash on the car. Well, if they get too close to another car in, say, a corner, that could be an even bigger problem this year with the Aerokits. So yeah, there's definitely some things to look out for that could go wrong with the Aerokits, particularly on the racing sides. Races could become more strategy focused, such as we saw in F1 in the early to mid thousands, rather than racing on track. They'd try and get ahead of a car through strategy, because they just can't make a way past them. But we haven't seen these Aerokits race yet. Let's look at the racing through first, and then judge after a few races and see how it goes, particularly on the oval side as well of the Indy 500. It should be fascinating to see how these Aerokits go on the ovals. So those are the Aerokits. There are some good points, there are some bad points. Let me know what you think about the Aerokits in the comments below. Do you think this is good for IndyCar, or do you think it will upset the spectacle and the show of IndyCar like I fear? But apart from the Aerokits, there have been a few changes to the rules in the off-season as well for IndyCar, and I'm going to pick out a couple of them now. The first of those rule changes is the elimination of standing starts from IndyCar for the time being. As the series said, they need to develop it more and look at it, and it did seem like the mechanics of it all did kind of cause more aborted starts than anything else, and on a couple of occasions there are horrendous crashes as well, such as we saw at the start of the Grand Prix of Indianapolis last year, when pole sitter Sebastian Saveja couldn't get away from his pole, and we saw cars piling into the back of it and debris going everywhere. So maybe for IndyCar is the best that the standing starts go away, but I will miss seeing these cars roll away from a standstill. And then there's double points. Last season in the IndyCar series, they were handed out to the 3 500-mile events, which comprised the Triple Crown, the Indy 500 at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the Pocono 500 held around the tricky triangle of Pocono, and the MAV TV 500 held around the Auto Club Speedway in Fontana, California, which also served as the season finale last year. Well, this year double points are handed out to the Indy 500 once again, and also the season finale of this season, the GoPro Grand Prix of Sonoma. And when F1 did the handing out points to the season finale thing last year, you could say the reaction was kind of negative. Well, that's been the same to the double points being handed out to Sonoma as well, as I can understand handing out double points to the Indy 500. It's a prestigious event, the jewel in the crown for the IndyCar series, the only world-renowned event for it as well. While the GoPro Grand Prix of Sonoma has been a quiet road race with some quiet racing in the past couple of years and is more known for its pit incidents rather than the passing out on track. So giving double points to a season finale just because it's a season finale is, well, bullshit, and hopefully that is gone for next season. I'm not a fan of double points in general, but if you're going to give double points out to anything, it might as well be to the jewel in the crown, and that is definitely the Indy 500 for the IndyCar series. Now we come to the calendar for this season, and as you can see, 16 rounds held around 15 venues. Has the Grand Prix of Detroit is the only doubleheader round this year, held at the end of May. Has Toronto, as you can see, held in June, has reverted back to just having a single race this year. Well, the calendar starts at the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg in Florida this weekend, and then it goes on to a new circuit, the only new addition to the calendar this year, at the NOLA Motorsports Park in Louisiana for the Grand Prix of Louisiana. And then we go to a more traditional venue around the streets of Long Beach a couple of weeks after Formula E have visited for the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach, and then onto Barber Motorsports Park for the Grand Prix of Alabama and that picturesque setting. And then it's the month of May with the Grand Prix of Indianapolis, followed by the 99th Indianapolis 500 before we go to Detroit. And look at that, we're already halfway through the season after just a couple of months, and there are only 3 months left of the season after the Chevrolet Indy Jewel in Detroit held at Belle Isle. Has at the beginning of June we head to the Texas Motor Speedway in Fort Worth, Texas for the Firestone 600 before heading up north for the only round held outside of the United States of America this season at Exhibition Place in Toronto in Ontario, Canada for the Honda Indy Toronto. And then at the end of June, it's the MAV TV 500 held at the Auto Club Speedway in Fontana, California. Has it's moved forward a few months from its kind of traditional season ending slot of the past 3 years. And in July, we've got a couple of oval rounds, starting with the ABC Supply Wisconsin 250 held at the old historic Milwaukee Mile before ending the month with a visit to the Iowa Speedway and the Iowa Corn Indy 300. And then it's on to the final month of the calendar of the season as we begin August with a visit to the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course and the Honda Indy 200. And then it's the final week of the season, beginning with the Pocono IndyCar 500 fueled by Sunoco, held at the Tricky Triangle in Pennsylvania before going on to the GoPro Grand Prix of Sonoma in Sonoma, California, held at the Sonoma Raceway. Apparently it's a wine region over there, so I'm sure there's going to be lots of celebrating once the season is over. At least this year's calendar has a good mix to it, a good balance to it, with 6 ovals, 5 road courses and 5 street circuits. Hopefully it can contain that balance going forward. But of course that isn't the full story of this year's calendar, as this season is already meant to have begun at the beginning of this month with a round in Brasilia in Brazil. Unfortunately, local government withdrew funding for upgrades to the circuit, so it got cancelled, and there was already kind of fuel and tyres over there, so the IndyCar officials looked at the Goiânia circuit, which you may have seen me feature with GameStop Extreme on this channel already, but it seems like it was too late to arrange anything for that, so that Brazil round has been cancelled. There were also rumours of a Dubai round, but those rumours never came to fruition. And there's also a couple of rounds from last year that are obviously not on the calendar. Of course, there's one round from Toronto not on this year's calendar, and also the round at Houston held around the Reliant Park, around the Texans Stadium, the NFL Texans Stadium as well. Well, that is gone for this year, as they couldn't find a place to put it on the calendar just due to scheduling conflicts. It's a shame. It's a bit like what happened to the Grand Prix of Baltimore from a couple of years ago, and it's another street race gone. I'm sure some people are happy about that, but Houston, it was a kind of a different circuit. I kind of liked it, even though it did claim the end of Dario Franchitti's career a couple of years ago. But yeah, that is the calendar for this season. Hopefully you will see some more races on it next year, as Mark Miles does want to put some more overseas races on this calendar. That's when he was talking about being an alternative to F1. Maybe they can pick up some circuits that F1 has put by the wayside, particularly in Europe in recent years. I'm hoping that does happen going forward, but it still looks like he's ending this calendar year on, I believe it's Labor Day weekend in America. I still don't understand why is he doing that. I know we're going to be batting the NFL, but so does every other motorsport series. I still don't understand that, but it seems like you want to start the season earlier going forward, maybe in February, and end it again at the end of August, so at least it will be another couple of months, or another month longer maybe, going ahead. But anyway, that's enough of the calendar. Let's actually go into the meat and bones of this season, preview the teams and drivers, the competitors of this IndyCar Series season. We've got 12 teams, we've got over 20 drivers confirmed for this season, and we're going to start off with maybe the biggest one of the lot, as we are going to start with the biggest teams and go to the smallest at the end. I'm going to go the reverse of what I normally do. Penske, I've got to start with them. This is a juggernaut. This is a team that's probably going to steamroller the opposition in 2015. You could say success is in the bones of Team Penske, built into the fabric and tradition of the team, as for every series they have entered, they've almost won in every series, in kart, IndyCar, NASCAR, F1 even, and endurance racing. Well, they're a couple races into the V8 Supercar adventure, but they're bound to win in that as well. And so for Team Penske this year, it is just a frightening looking team. They have already got a successful formula from last year, and they have just built on it and expanded it from 3 cars to 4 cars for the first time in the IndyCar Series. And they've also made changes off the driver front as well, as Carl Moyer, the former team manager at Andretti Autosport, is now in a similar role at Team Penske, and that is a very frightening thought for everyone involved in the sport, as Penske seems to have this nice structure off the track, and as I said, got a nice structure on it now, with Simon Pagenaud joining from Schmidt, Peterson Motorsports, the highly rated free agent signing this season, and Penske got him. And the Frenchman is alongside one of his greatest rivals and pals of the IndyCar Series, if you could say he's a pal, in Will Power, the reigning champion, has, after many years of just not quite reaching the summit, he finally got there, as he was runner-up to Dario Franchitti in 2010 and 2011. He was runner-up to Ryan Hunter-Reay in 2012. He was the form guy of the last few races of 2013, and that form just reciprocated itself in 2014 as he took the title from his teammate Helio Castronves. And for Will Power in 2015, the goal is again the same, just continue his form and maybe he'll retain his title. But he has got great opposition this year, not least in his own team. As I said, Simon Pagenaud is a guy who's very highly rated in this series. He was a guy in Champ Car alongside Power in 2007, before that series had met its demise when it merged for the IndyCar Series at the beginning of 2008. And then Pagenaud went off to endurance racing, won the American Le Mans Series LMP1 title, and also drove at Le Mans for Peugeot. Then he came back to a series a few years ago, and with Peterson Motorsports, he has built a fearsome reputation for a very consistent guy, a driver who makes few mistakes and is always competitive on track. In his rookie season in IndyCar in 2012, he was runner-up to Power at Long Beach and finished 5th in the championship. Then he was 3rd in the championship in 2013, and so the natural progression for last year was that he could challenge for the title. Unfortunately, his title chances kind of fluttered a bit in the last few races of the season, but he still finished in the top 5, and he still got his big move and his big chance with Team Penske this season. And so, with half the team, as you can see, you've got two hungry guys who have battled each other throughout their career. You had Will Power and Simon Pagenaud even battling each other in Formula Renault 3.5 a decade ago. And so they know each other very well, and obviously there will be some friction from their goings-on from the past couple of years, but at least there will be some chemistry there as well, as they know each other very, very well. And on the other side of the garage, you have two guys who will turn 40 this season. Firstly, Helio Castronves, the runner-up for the 2nd year in a row last season. Just like in 2013, he fell apart at the last. In 2013, he tried to go for the consistent route, settling for the top 10s, just racking up points at every round. Unfortunately, his challenge got undone in Houston when he suffered a couple of mechanical failures, and so he was on the back foot to a charging Scott Dixon in that last part of the season. And it was again in 2014 where he was on the back foot to another charging driver, this time his teammate Will Power. Well, he racked up the points in the last third of the season. Castronves hit a buffer. He had problems in Toronto, in Mid-Ohio, in Sonoma, and in Fontana in the season finale, where despite grabbing pole position, he didn't quite have the pace to stay at the top. And in the end, he got some insult headed to injury at the end when he got a drive-through penalty in the last 30 laps after a rare miscall by Roger Penske, who served as his race engineer. And Castronves did have a change of plan last season. It wasn't all about consistency and getting those top 10s. It was about pushing and getting those top 5s. And certainly with Will Power having, well, lots of penalties, I think he was the most penalised driver in the series last season. Castronves couldn't capitalise on that, as Power just, with his outright pace, just powered through the field and still got those top 10s and top 5 finishes, and Castronves wasn't getting the wins or the podiums to capitalise on those issues for Power. And so for Castronves, it was the 2nd season in a row where it looks like he was very consistent during the championship. He just did not quite have that thing to get over the line and grab a championship. With Scott Dixon, it was his consistency and power and this building up a form with Chip Ganassi in the second half of that 2013 season. Well, last year with Power, it was, as I said, despite his issues, it was his just raw pace that could outdo Castronves. And so for 2015, you wonder if the Brazilian can have another title charge, and if he is the guy here at Penske. He's now got a couple of young pops, well, in their early to mid-30s alongside him, and you wonder if he's going to have more competition from his own team, aside from, you know, the likes of Chip Ganassi, the likes of Andretti, the drivers there as well, and he's just going to struggle to fit into that championship fight this season. And that's a worry for Castronves, as despite being a 3-time Indy 500 champion, he's never grabbed a car or IndyCar title, and it looks like his last chance of last season, it just looks like he's now going to settle towards the end of his career as being this kind of loyal Penske driver, and he's going to be there for however long he wants to be, and it looks like he's going to have to give way to the likes of Pagenaud and Power for that title fight. Meanwhile, for Juan Pablo Montoya, is a very different story in 2014, as he returned to open wheel racing after almost a decade away, and this is after 7 years in NASCAR as well. So obviously on the ovals he was right at home. He particularly took advantage of the 500 milers, so this loss of double points and the Triple Crown to the series will really affect Montoya the most, as he finished 4th in the championship, but most of those points were built on the results he got at the Indy 500 with a 5th place, with that dominant performance at Pocono where he got pole and the win, and then at Fontana where he finished 4th and led the most laps. So for Montoya, he's really got to just spread out his form, as he was fantastic on the ovals, but on the road and street courses he really struggled, particularly on the street courses and the double header weekends. as he showed in Detroit and Toronto. He didn't finish in the top 10 at all. In Houston, he did finish on the podium and a 7th place finish, which was a bit of an anomaly, but in general he just struggled with controlling the tyres and the tyre wear and managing his tyres. He was just too erratic, it seemed, on the throttle pedal for these modern day Formula single-seater cars, as he drove like he did in the kart series on occasion. Well, it's fantastic to see. It was just burning up his tyres. So for Montoya, if he's learned his lesson from last year, learned how to manage the tyres a bit more, he will be a threat on those road and street courses. As the pace was there on occasion, he just didn't have that managing of the race strategy really, of the tyres and managing that. If he can get that together, he could certainly challenge for the title though this season, as he did look like a man with, renewed kind of hope, as in his last seasons of NASCAR he's just trolling around in like finishing in the 20th to 30th places in the standings. He was really not a fixture in NASCAR apart from the odd race every season. Well, in IndyCar he's now fighting at the front on almost every occasion, especially if he gets on top of that tyre wear issues this season, and he could certainly be in the title fight with his two younger teammates, and of course with Castronves maybe as well. So for Penske in general, the mission plan is simple. We had 4 drivers in the top 5 from last season. They have to be in the top 5 again this season, and of course challenging for the title. Of course, Will Power enters the season as the pre-season favourite, and I wouldn't put it past him to double up and retain his title, but Simon Pagenaud appears to be his nearest challenger in my book, and certainly being in the same team is going to be very tasty this season. Well, as I said, for Castronves is a very likeable Briscoe and one of the faces of IndyCar. Unfortunately, I think his time has gone to challenge and grab a title, but I still think he could finish up there in the top 10, maybe even the top 5 if he does, a consistent job all around like he did in 2013. And then for Montoya, well, he's a bit of a wild card once again this season. We didn't know what to expect from him in 2014. I still don't really know what to expect from him from 2015, but from he will be fast on the ovals and probably one of the favourites for the Indy 500 if the Chevrolet Aerokit, of course, is very good on their car. So for Penske, expect more domination in 2015. I did want to say that it could be a good battle, but if Chevrolet have nailed the Aerokit like it looks like they have done in pre-season, it could just be Penske podiums all the way through the season. But no, I don't think it will be like that. But expect to see Penske a lot in the winner's circle. So we have looked at the juggernaut of this season. We've looked at the big dog. Let's look at another big dog in this series and the arch rival to Penske in recent years, and that is Chip Ganassi. To say there's been change on the Chip Ganassi front during the off-season would be kind of understating things. There's been lots of movements here and there, and of course there's been some departures as well, not least Ryan Briscoe in the 3rd car. He may have finished 11th in last year's championship, equal on points for Sebastian Bourdais. Unfortunately, Bourdais won in Toronto. Well, Ryan Briscoe was a consistent driver in the most part, got lots of top 10s, but only got 1 top 5 in Pocono, where he also got the fastest lap. And that's the thing with Briscoe, he's kind of overshadowed by Kanaan and Dixon last year, but wasn't doing as poorly as Kimball. He was just kind of in this average land. And so for Briscoe, he's maybe a driver more suited to endurance racing nowadays rather than the single-seaters and the DW12, as he just wasn't sticking his head out and, saying, notice me. I never really noticed Briscoe. If he ran well in the top 10, I'd be like, yeah, that's good for him. If he, in Pocono, I was like, that's nice to see. But apart from that, he just never looked like he was winning or improving during the season, such as Kanaan and Dixon did in front of him. And so for Briscoe, with all of that experience as well, with Team Penske previously, with Chip Ganassi previously as well, he's departed IndyCar in 2014, after the 2014 season, for the young upstart, the exciting young American face of IndyCar maybe for the future, in Sage Karam, the 2013 Indy Lights champion, who has impressed so well in since winning that title, with a run at the 24 Hours of Daytona this year, and of course in last year's Indianapolis 500, and he ran to the top 10 finish after impressively just moving his way through the field, managing the traffic and just looking like a seasoned veteran in that Chip Ganassi run car. And so this season for Sage Karam, while he's replacing Briscoe even at St. Petersburg. It's still only a one race deal, and it's dependent on sponsors and how well he does in St. Petersburg. So no pressure on Karam for his future, but he has been in Chip Ganassi stable for a few years now, and they know what to expect from the young guy, and I'm sure he will do well in St. Petersburg and get more rides as the season goes on, and maybe even be a full-time ride. And he's also alongside Charlie Kimball, who had a very disappointing year in 2014. In 2013, he was a guy on the rise. He looked like he was improving, and when he had an opportunity to win in Mid-Ohio, they got the strategy right, and he grabbed that opportunity with two hands and grabbed that race win ahead of Simon Pagenaud, his only win in IndyCar to date. In 2014, he never really looked like that driver. Yeah, he got his podium in Detroit, and he got a few top fives on the street courses in the doubleheader rounds. But apart from that, he was just too inconsistent and just seemed to struggle in general, as Chip Ganassi in general struggled in the first half of the season, but he didn't improve with them as the season went on. And so for 2015, I'm expecting Kimball to be a bit better in that car, get some more top 10s on the board, and look a bit more like the driver he was in 2013, this rising star of the series. And hopefully for Kimball, of course, with major backing as well due to his diabetes as well, he seems to be a fixture in the Chip Ganassi team for years to come, and hopefully he can deliver and justify being in that fourth car, or third car now, for the team. So it's on to the other side of the garage where the big changes have been happening. Scott Dixon, a 2003, 2008 and 2013 champion, has split from his long-time engineer with Chip Ganassi for the past 12 years, Eric Besman, who's gone over to the NASCAR side of things for Chip Ganassi. Well, he's now got a new race engineer in Chris Simmons, who's been the engineer for the sister target car in recent years of Darry Franchitti and Tony Kanaan. So that's a new partnership for Scott Dixon to gel with, and that could take a few races for that to happen. And the last thing Dixon needs is another IndyCar Series campaign with a slow start, such as he has suffered in recent years. In 2013, it took him like half the season for Chip Ganassi to get on top of their gun, get on top of their setups, but by the time they did, in the last half of the season, he was the foreman, and he grabbed that title from Castronves. And in last season, when Chip Ganassi switched from Honda engines to Chevrolet, they admitted it took them like half a season to get used to that. And for Scott Dixon, once again, that was kind of highlighted by his Indy 500 performance and that crash out last year. But in the second half of the season, once again, he was a wrecking ball. He took wins at Mid-Ohio and Sonoma, highlighting his great fuel conservation skills, while also highlighting the pace and turnaround that Chip Ganassi has showed. And he finished third in the standings last year, just 5 points behind Castronves in the end. So for Dixon, getting a good start is kind of premium for him, so he's not always on the back foot like he has been in recent seasons. While for Tony Kanaan, he joined Chip Ganassi last year from KV Racing, who he won the Indy 500 with in 2013. And again for Kanaan, he was on the back foot for like the first part of the season, once again highlighted by a lonely finish in the Indy 500. But in the second half of the season, he racked up the podiums, and he finally got that win in Fontana that he so deserved in the last half of that season, and he finished 7th in the standings. And for Kanaan, he showed that, yeah, he changed team. He stepped up to another big team once again after being in the midfield with KV for a couple of seasons, and he has not lost it. He is a very good driver, especially on the ovals. Sometimes on the road courses he was kind of lost, a bit behind Scott Dixon, but I'm sure that will improve this season. And the main thing for Tony Khan this season is that he's lost his race engineer, so he's got a new one. Long-time Brian Herter Autosport engineer in Tony Malloy has joined him, and that's again another new partnership that could take a few races to gel, and again he could be on the back foot as well. So for Chip Ganassi, lots of changes, and lots of changes in sponsorship as well. Has Target have down their sponsorship from sponsoring 2 cars to just 1, the number 9 of Scott Dixon. So the number 10 of Tony Khan has the NTT Data sponsorship that Ryan Briscoe had on his car last season. And so that could, provide some minor changes for Tony Khan. But the big change for him again is the race engineer. And again, on this side of the garage, the race engineer, jetting and stuff, that will be the major part of the early part of the season. As of course, all the teams are on the back foot with these Aerokits and getting used to them as well. So for Chip Ganassi, with all of these changes, once again they could start the season on the back foot, and that is the last thing they need this season, as is the level playing field with these Aerokits. No one knows the kind of sweet spot with them, and the team that hits that sweet spot first has that little edge on the competition, and especially for Chip Ganassi, if it's their arch rivals Team Penske, well, it's the worst case scenario, and with Team Penske it could be the worst case scenario for the rest of the field and for the series. But for Chip Ganassi and Joe, they just need a good start. They need a consistent season once again, as we have seen. The first half of the season we can write off. The second half of the season we can carry on that form into the next season. That's been their pattern for the last few seasons. They need to, start producing right away and not always be playing catch up like they have in the past couple of seasons. But they are the most successful team in IndyCar series history has. In the last decade, well, Penske's now won 2 titles, Andretti has won 3, Chip Ganassi has won 5, 3 with Dave and Kitty and 2 with Scott Dixon. So they are definitely a team that has that pedigree and formula there to be successful throughout the whole season. They're just not reproducing it at the moment. But hopefully, that Scott Dixon, Tony Kanaan can gel with their engineers very quickly, and hopefully Chevrolet will provide them with a very good aero kit like it seems like they have done in pre-season, and they can be challenging up there from the beginning, and hopefully you can see an epic battle with the likes of Scott Dixon, Will Power, Simon Pagenaud, Aerokits, Juan Pablo Montoya, Tony Kanaan, even the Andretti guys such as Ryan Hunter-Reay can all be up there fighting for the title for the whole season. That would be fantastic for IndyCar. But for Chip Ganassi, just getting a good start will be great for them, and it'd be great to see Sage Karam as well have that great start and hopefully have a full-time ride. As I said, he's a young gun, he's a young American that we could back in this series for many years to come, and he could be very good for this series if he has a full-time ride and continues to show the form that he's shown in the past couple of seasons. So, and hopefully you can see Charlie Kimball as well step up his form as well for this season from a very disappointing 2014. So for Chip Ganassi, they're hoping to have a strong start and continue that throughout the season. And we've got kind of a trifecta at the top of the big boys in IndyCar, where we've looked at 2 of them with Penske and Chip Ganassi. Let's look at the other team that has won titles in the past decade, and that is Andretti Autosport. If you follow the Global Rallycross Championship and Formula E, you may already be familiar with Andretti Autosport with their chargers such as John Eric Verne in Formula E and Scott Speed in the Global Rallycross Championship. I know he recently was a charger in the Formula E race in Miami. And Andretti Autosport also are a big helpful team on the road to IndyCar, the Mazda Road to Indy, providing a team for the Pro Mazda and Indy Lights Championship, and until recently providing a team in the US F2000 Championship as well. So Andretti have had a very busy off-season with their other racing activities, but they've also been busy developing the Honda Aero Kit, the only team developing the Honda Aero Kit as well this off-season, while Chevrolet have had the likes of Penske, Chip Ganassi and KV Racing on hand to develop theirs. That's kind of worrying heading into the season for Honda. And while Andretti Autosport have been developing this Aero Kit, that is kind of worrying though heading into the season, that they're the only point of reference for this Aero Kit heading into the season. We don't know if they've developed in the wrong direction or haven't been very helpful compared to the likes of Chevrolet with their abundance of teams that have been on hand to help them develop theirs. And so for the likes of Ryan Hunter-Reay, Marco Andretti and Carlos Munoz, that's a bit worrying heading into the season, that they're kind of already on the back foot, at least on the Aero Kit front, it seems, on development for Honda compared to Chevrolet, as Honda seemed to be, putting pieces on and off the car. They weren't really sure what was the right formula for the Aero Kit, it seemed, in the recent test at Barbara and in Sebring this week. So for Andretti Autosport, the lead team for Honda this season, leading the charge against Chevrolet and Chip Ganassi and Team Penske, a lot is riding on their shoulders, especially the likes of Ryan Hunter-Reay and Marco Andretti, but also Carlos Munoz, the Rookie of the Year last season, the young Colombian who just shot onto the IndyCar scene in 2013, finishing runner-up in the Indy 500 to Tony Kanaan. And Carlos Munoz was again very energetic on times last year, particularly at Long Beach, getting a podium in Pocono, and he seemed to be very strong at Indy 500 once again, finishing in the top 5 there. And for Carlos Munoz, though, it was an up and down season. While he was Rookie of the Year, finishing 8th in the standings, his nearest challenger was Mikhail Aleshkin, who I thought was actually Rookie of the Year, but finished much lower down in the standings. And Jack Hawksworth, who again was very up and down with in a single car team with Brian Hurty Autosport. So Carlos Munoz definitely had the best environment, it seemed, to get that Rookie of the Year last year, with very experienced teammates alongside him and in one of the top teams in the series. And for Munoz in 2015, well, we want to see a bit more consistency from him, as he did make the odd mistake, and that, of course you expect that. But the top 3 finisher in the 2013 Indy Lights Championship, well, he's definitely got the potential there. He was a bit like seeing a young Juan Pablo Montoya race onto the scene back in 2013, at the Indy 500 at Fontana. And again in Peter's last season, he's got that kind of crazy style to him. But as I said, he needs to kind of rein it in a bit and get some more results on the board. While he got those top 5 finishes, there wasn't much more on the board results-wise. And again, that was kind of an epidemic with Andretti last season in general, though. So for Munoz, yeah, you want some more consistent results this year. And again, getting a top 10 in the standards will be very good for him. And the 4th car for this team is actually a bit of a mystery. Yeah, at St. Petersburg, we've got Simona Di Silvestro, the returnee to the series after an ill-fated Fiat driver role with Sauber last season, which came to nothing. But she is a driver who's a bit of a mystery herself, as there is a lot expected of her, with her finally getting a top ride in IndyCar this weekend, and a lot depends on this ride of how well she does this weekend, getting sponsorship, maybe getting a full-time ride, or just doing more events this season, depending on how well she does at St. Petersburg this weekend. It is certainly the biggest time in her career, it seems. You could say the Sauber role was her biggest time last year, but again, as I said, that went to nothing and almost ruined her career. And so she returns to IndyCar on a bit of a low, but she's willing to turn into a series that she's very familiar with. She was with it for 3 years with HVM, from her debut in 2011 to 2012 and 2010, sorry. And then she moved to KV Racing in 2013 alongside Indy 500 champion that year, Tony Kanaan. And in the last part of that season, the second half of the season, she did better than Kanaan, just finished a couple of places behind him in the standings. He was 11th, she was 13th. And she finished the season with 5 top 10 finishes on the trot, and she was only a few points behind him in the end in the standings. If you take away the double points for the Indy 500 win, if that was just a normal point standing, she would have been actually slightly ahead of him, I believe, in the standings, or at least very equal to him in the standings. And so she definitely showed some pedigree in that second half of the 2013 season, and I was really looking forward to see what she could do in 2014 in an IndyCar. Unfortunately, she went the F1 route, that didn't work out, but now we do finally get to see what she could do in an IndyCar in 2015. The problem is she's been away from an IndyCar for quite a long time, since Fontana in 2013. She hasn't driven an IndyCar with the Aerokits. I think she's done some private testing, but she hasn't been on board with the Honda Aerokit development that, as I said, Andretti have been solely doing this past off season. So it's going to be very challenging for her this weekend, and a lot is kind of expected of her, as I said, for future plans for this season. But I'm just hoping that she has a clean race and that she shows herself to be a very competent driver, and just have a very clean weekend in general. I think if she keeps it out of the wall, has decent pace, gets maybe a top 10 finish, I think that would be enough for her to at least get some more ride in this car going forward. But we could also see a revolving cast in this 4th car, and maybe even a 5th car if Simona, gets, say, full-time sponsorship for a full-time ride this season, or some other driver. We could see the likes of Justin Wilson, who somehow inexplicably has been left on the sidelines so far this season. He could get a few rides in this car, and some other drivers as well, of course, depending on sponsorship and such. And so for Simona in general, though, this weekend, as I said, just keep it clean, and hopefully the rides will come to her as the season goes on. We will see a bit more of her this season. As I said, she's an unknown quantity. We kind of are trying to find out how good she is, and of course this weekend will be the first stepping stone to finding out that. Well, on the other side of the garage, we have the 2 experienced campaigners with the team, Ryan Hunter-Reay and Marco Andretti. And especially for Marco Andretti, it's a season to deliver, as for the famous sons with the famous surnames, well, we've got Graham Rahal and Marco Andretti, and neither of them have really developed into much, unfortunately, after early promise in their careers. And for Marco, he's actually improved to be a kind of consistent driver. He showed that in 2013. He finished 5th in the championship, his best finish in an IndyCar Series championship, and that was on the back of some very consistent performances, and on occasion he should have really won. Unfortunately, fate got in the way of that. But last year again he was kind of consistent, and particularly in the early part of the season was right up there with his teammate Ryan Hunter-Reay. But then it kind of unravelled in the second half of the season. He dropped to 9th in the standings in the end, and he never really showed that instinct, it seemed, to win races. He was runner-up at Barber, he was 3rd in the Indy 500, but the wins never looked like they were coming for him, and he needs wins this season. He can show he can be consistent, but he needs wins to be, finish further up in the championship and then challenge for championships. And that is something we have wanted from Marco for about a decade now. We've wanted him to step up and get more wins on the board. It's been, I believe, about 5 years now since we've seen a win from him. Actually, a bit less than 5 years since we've seen a win from Marco, and is really overdue. As I said, he was unlucky in parts in 2013, but you couldn't really say the same in 2014. So for Marco Andretti, he shows the pace on occasion. He's got some consistency. He's a driver who can finish in the top 10 in the championship, and probably will finish in the top 10 in the championship most seasons. But we just want a bit more from him, and to show that there isn't a bit of nepotism that why he's got this seat as well. We want to show that he has got that quality to him, and so a win will go a long way to showing that this season. As I said, his form will be consistent and be right up there, getting the odd top 5 and get mostly top 10s, hopefully, this season. But for Honda, the big worry for them heading into this season is that Penske are stacked, but Chevrolet are stacked in general. They've got 5 champions and 6 Indy 500 wins between them. Honda have only got 1 Indy 500 win and 1 champion in their stable, and they belong to Ryan Hunter-Reay, the reigning Indy 500 champion, after that marvellous move on Castronves in the dying moments of the last year's Indy 500, almost going onto the grass into turn 3, and he grabbed that win, and he grabbed that Indy 500 title. And he won the championship in 2012 the same way. Will Power made a mistake in Fontana, and he got to the finish and managed to just grab and hold on to the title in the end. So for Ryan Hunter-Reay, he is the leader of Honda, the leader of Andretti Autosport this season. Lots of expectation is on his shoulders to fight the Penske, to fight the Chip Ganassi, and fight the big Chevrolet boys. And he certainly has stepped up to play, as I said, in recent years, winning that title, winning that Indy 500. He's now crossed those off the bucket list, and now he is just fighting for more success. And like he was getting that last season, as after that Indy 500 when he was leading the championship. Unfortunately, he was inexplicably inconsistent, and that was the same for, as I said, most of Andretti Autosport. They would get top 10s, finish in the top 5s one weekend, and then somehow just run into loads of issues at another weekend, as highlighted with the Detroit doubleheader last year, where Hunter-Reay just couldn't get the car going. It seemed he always had issues with it. And so for Andretti Autosport and Ryan Hunter-Reay this season, they need consistency. And as I said, with the Honda Aerokit, a bit of a worry about that. But at least if, they have these worries with it, at least if he puts in the performances, get the top 10s, at least if he's consistent, that's a good showing for him this season. As I said, they needed consistency this season to be challenging at the top, rather than, having the odd performance and then just dropping off the face of the earth the next race weekend. So for Ryan Hunter-Reay, he is the lead man for Honda. A lot of eyes will be on him this season, and it'll be interesting to see, as he always seems to be doing in his career. He seems to be stepping up, and can he step up again in 2015 as he did when he got his big opportunity of Andretti back in 2010, won in Long Beach if I remember correctly, stepped up in 2012 when a title was on the line and won that, stepped up last year to grab that Indy 500 win. Now he's got to step up in 2015 and be that lead Honda driver. And just like Chip Ganassi, there's been lots of changes for Andretti Autosport this past off-season. You may have heard me not mention James Hinchcliffe's name. Well, he's gone off to Schmidt, Peterson, Motorsports. And of course, when I mentioned and talked about Penske, they lost Carl Moyer, their team manager, to that juggernaut. And in his place, they've brought in Rob Edwards from Schmidt Peterson Motorsports, who's done a sterling job with that small team in recent years, and they couldn't have found a better replacement for Moyer on the grid, in my view. And so for Andretti Autosport, they've got to rebuild this chemistry which served them so well in recent years to a title, to an Indy 500 win, with the likes of Hunter-Reay, Andretti and now Munoz having to form this great chemistry for this team as they lead this Honda charge on the Chevrolet juggernaut ahead of them. And whoever's going to be in that fourth car, as I said, that could be a revolving car, so it could be a full-time ride depending on sponsorship. Of course, sponsorship seems to rule the motor racing world, and so we could even see four full-time cars just like last season, and maybe even a fifth car on appearance as well, such as we saw at the Grand Prix of Indianapolis with Frank Montani and at the Indy 500 with Kurt Busch. So maybe look out for a fifth car, especially for the Indy 500. But in general, for Andretti Autosport, they need to get rid of these kind of up and down performances and, just get rid of these gremlins they always seem to run into during the season and just be a bit more consistent like they were back in 2012 for Ryan Hunter-Reay. And of course, all the expectation is on that American's shoulders. And as I said, he always seems to have stepped up in his career in the past 5 years with Andretti Autosport. And so Hunter-Reay, actually in his whole career, he seems to have stepped up. Whenever he's had an opportunity, he seems to have done very well. So for Hunter-Reay, all eyes will be on him for this Honda Aerokit and for Andretti Autosport as well. But of course, look out for Marco to hopefully step up and maybe grab that win finally again, and for Munoz to maybe get some more consistent performances behind the back and maybe even challenge for wins as well. And for whoever's in that fourth car, for Silvestro this weekend to perform well and hopefully earn themselves some more rides as the season goes on. And especially if Justin Wilson gets in that fourth car, I'll be very excited to see how he goes. So that's the big three. And you may have seen a problem that has occurred in IndyCar. For St. Petersburg, we have 24 cars on the grid, up from 22 from last year, so that's very good for the series. But half of those 24 cars are occupied by Penske, Chip Ganassi and Andretti Autosport. I've already covered 12 of them, and there's 12 left between 7 teams. So, yeah, there is a money problem in IndyCar. It may not be as acidic as it is in F1, but it is definitely there, and hopefully with the team payments, that they're giving out this year up from $1 million to $1.25 million for the top 21 entrants, I believe, in the series. It's over 20 entrants. I believe it's 21 or 22 entrants. Hopefully that will help that problem in years to come, but of course it could just help, the bigger teams become even bigger. So for IndyCar, yeah, that's a bit of a worry about the grid sizes and how it's occupied mainly by 3 teams. But now we've got 7 more teams to look at, and in the top 10 last season in the drivers' standings, there were 8 drivers from the big 3 teams that I've covered. There was also Simon Pagenaud as well, he finished 5th, and Sebastian Bourdais in 10th for KV Racing. And once again, that pair, they could be big in 2015. And under the lights, we cover the 7 other full-time teams in the Verizon IndyCar Series this season, starting with KV Racing, a team that's been on the up ever since they won the Indy 500 back in 2013 with Tony Kanaan, a team that struggled with setups that season actually, but once they figured it out, went back to the old setups, they were very quick that season. And last season, of course, with Sebastian Bourdais finishing in the top 10 overall in the drivers' standings, they were very fast as well, as Bourdais won his first race in an open wheeler since Mexico City in 2007 in a champ car, when he won at Toronto last year, and in that crazy weekend at Toronto with the rain and with the 2 races on the same day. Well, Sebastian Bourdais was very quick that day in that car, and that kind of propelled him for a late season kind of rush towards the top 10 in the stands, as he was kind of a bit more consistent in that second half of the season. But for KV in general last year, they did look good, on occasion, and as I said, once they sorted it out, it seems, after the first half of the season, they were very quick, especially with Bourdais, as the team owned by Kevin Cahoven and 1996 kart champion Jimmy Vasser. They have built a very good team here as they came over in the unification of 2008 with drivers such as Will Power, but even Oil Serbia, and they were quite a solid midfield team, and then started going down a bit, and then, as I said, have been rising in the past couple of seasons. So for 2015, much is expected of them, especially with the Chevrolet engine in the bag, with the Chevrolet Aerokit, which seems to be a better Aerokit at the moment from pre-season testing. And as I say, team on the rise with Bourdais, who seems to be a driver full of confidence now, especially in coming into the season full of confidence, as well as after his 4 championships in Champ Car, he's been on an adventure, it seems, in his career, driving in F1 with Toro Rosso, which didn't end particularly well, and then coming back to IndyCar in the past couple of seasons with the likes of Del Coyne, and then with Dragon Racing in 2012 and 2013. And with Dragon Racing in 2013 in particular, they seem to hit the formula again in that halfway mark with a double podium at Toronto, really changing the season again. And then in the last half of the season, Bourdais looking particularly good with that team on his way to 12th in the standings. But as I said, last year he finished 10th in the standings, and in recent years it's been his endurance racing which is where he's been getting his results. And he comes from Le Mans, his home race in the Le Mans 24 Hours. He's finished runner-up 3 times, and he's drove for Peugeot for a number of years, won a number of races with them. And in recent years he's been winning in the kind of Grand Am Championship, or the United Sports Car Tudor Championship that is now known. And he won the 24 Hours of Daytona last year, finished runner-up in the 24 Hours of Daytona this year, but won the 12 Hours of Sebring just the past weekend, I believe it is. So yeah, he's definitely a man on form heading into this season, and he could be a big surprise into the season as well. I don't mean that in January, I mean that it could be a surprise seeing him in the top 5, with the likes of those Chip Ganassi and Penske teams and drivers, as he's a driver. He very much kind of depends on confidence, it seems, and he's on a crest of a wave at the moment, and he is that leader for this team, as I said, on the up a bit, and he's definitely a driver that's been on the up the past couple of seasons. So yeah, I'm expecting a lot from Bourdais. I'm expecting more wins, more podiums, more top 5s, more top 10s. I'm expecting him not to be as up and down. Maybe that's going to be a bit of a casualty, as it seems to be with kind of a less funded team, at least, compared to the big 3. But no, I do expect him to at least be in the top 10 more and be higher up in the top 10 driver stands by the end of the season. And one of the biggest questions this past off-season was who's going to be alongside Bourdais in this KV Racing seat. We saw the likes of Simona Di Silvestro, Justin Wilson, and a number of European drivers linked to this seat. As last season with KV Racing, they had Sebastian Saveja in this seat, and the Colombian was a bit dreadful. He did get pole for the Grand Prix of Indianapolis. Unfortunately, he stalled at the start and got run into the back of in quite a horrendous crash. But in general, he wasn't very good, as he finished 21st out of the 21 full-time drivers in last season's championship. He finished just 29 points ahead of Ed Carpenter and just 39 points ahead of Mike Conway, and Carpenter and Conway were sharing a seat at Ed Carpenter Racing, so that kind of puts in perspective how bad Saveja was. So for this season, again, they needed some money in that seat, but they needed a better driver, and they certainly looks like they've got one in Stefano Coletti. He's been impressive in pre-season testing, and the Monegasque driver is a veteran of the GP2 series in Europe the past few seasons. He was full-time in GP2 since the 2011 season, despite doing a few races for Durango back in 2009. And he's been a very solid driver in the GP2 series this past 4 seasons. In 2013, he started off the season fantastically. He was the championship leader up to the halfway mark, and then in the second half of the season, he didn't score any points on his way down to 5th place in the final standings. And in last season, he got a couple of race wins, such as in the Germany sprint race and the Abu Dhabi sprint race, on his way to 6th in the championship, but he's never challenging, for the championship like he should have done really in his 4th season in that category. And so, of course, the route to F1 was kind of blocked, so he looked to IndyCar, and he got this KV Racing seat, and he's looked very impressive in pre-season testing. He's looked like a duck to water. He looks very comfortable in an IndyCar, and he's kind of a dark horse, I believe, especially for St. Petersburg this weekend, as I think he's joint highest odds of 100-1 to win this race. So maybe it's worth a cheeky tenner on him for this weekend. But in general, over the season, again, I expect him to have some struggles, especially on the ovals. It seems like everyone seems to struggle from coming from Europe to IndyCar on the ovals, unless your name is Mansell or Aleshkin from last season. But yeah, it looks like it's going to be a struggle on the ovals. But on the road and street courses, especially on the road courses, I expect him to figure quite strongly, and expect to be up there in the top 10 finishes, and maybe not in the top 15 in the final driver's standings, but at least getting some top 10 finishes, maybe even top 5 finishes if he's lucky enough with the strategy and how it plays out, especially on the street courses. But yeah, for Coletti, this is an exciting time for his career. A bit like Aleshkin, actually. His career was kind of stalling in the European Feeder Series. But now he's come to IndyCar, he can breathe some fresh air into his career, and there's a new release of life for his career as well, and hopefully for him as well in IndyCar, and he can start showing some more performances like we kind of expected from him in GP2 in recent years. And for KV Racing in general, this could be a big opportunity for them to get some, more race wins and more podiums, more top 5s and more top 10s if this Chevrolet Aerokit is better than the Honda Aerokit as it looks in pre-season testing. So they could start the season quite strong with, St. Petersburg, with Long Beach, with Alabama, with the Grand Prix of Indianapolis, getting some solid results behind them before inevitably, the likes of Andretti Autosport and Honda catch up. But yeah, for Sebastian Bourdais in particular, I'm looking for him to get some results, and maybe Coletti as well can surprise us on the road and street courses, and who knows if he can, adapt to the ovals like Aleshkin did last year. Maybe he could surprise us on those as well. But for KV Racing, this year could be a big opportunity for them for the introduction of these Aerokits. But their big rivals in this midfield battle could be Schmidt, Peterson, Motorsports. Schmidt, Peterson, Motorsports have been kind of the little man success story in recent years, really pushing and punching above their weight with Simon Pagenaud in recent years since becoming a full-time entrant in the IndyCar series. Of course, Sam Schmidt has been hugely successful in Indy Lights in recent years, running a number of cars in that series. But in IndyCar series, he's been doing very well with Simon Pagenaud. But now that team has kind of been broken up, with Pagenaud going to Team Penske, with Rob Edwards, who's been the team manager and done a really great job with the team in recent years, moving on to Andretti Autosport as well. And so for Sam Schmidt and Rick Peterson, they have brought in James Hinchcliffe from Andretti Autosport to replace Pagenaud. And for Hinchcliffe as well, he's going to have a new race engineer, has Pagenaud brought his race engineer from Schmidt Peterson Motorsports to Team Penske as well. So it's going to be a very different team in 2015 for Schmidt Peterson Motorsports. But for James Hinchcliffe, this is a big moment. It's a big opportunity to lead a team in the IndyCar series. Since coming in as the IndyCar Series Rookie of the Year in 2011 with Newman House Racing, he's been at Andretti Autosport since 2012 and basically playing second fiddle to Ryan Hunter-Reay and being, even with Marco Andretti, and he's been a very comfortable member of that team, having great chemistry with those two and really helping build that team in recent years. And he was very consistent in the championship, at least in 2012 and 2013, and particularly in 2013 he started winning races and started looking like a very great driver for that team. But then he kind of fell off a bit in 2014, just like Charlie Kimball, as he did get a podium in Mid-Ohio, got numerous front row starts. I remember him qualifying second almost every other week, but he just couldn't convert them to results. Something or another would happen. He just wasn't getting the rub of the green. He just wasn't getting results. And so he only ended up 12th in the championship last year. Very disappointing for him, very disappointing for Andretti Autosport as well, as he was the only driver of theirs to finish outside of the top 10 in the standings. And so for James Hinchcliffe, this is a new opportunity for him to lead a team and show that he can be a lead driver in a team, as he showed in his junior Formula career in 2010. He was runner-up in the 2010 Indy Lights Championship with Team Moore, as he finished runner-up. And so for Hinchcliffe now, he's got this big opportunity on the big stage to lead a team and be the kind of second team for Honda as well, behind Andretti Autosport. And so for the team as well, as I said, it's going to be a new dynamic for the team. And will Hinchcliffe click with the team? I think he will. He's one of the most charismatic people in the paddock. He's got the great personality. He's one of the faces of the IndyCar series. He's one of the great ambassadors for the IndyCar series, along with, Joseph Newgarden as well. And so for James Hinchcliffe, it is a big year for him, and I'm expecting big things from him. Maybe not wins, maybe your podium, the top fives, the top tens. I'm expecting a much better year from him, out from, being just a member of the team at Andretti to being the lead driver, the lead man for Schmidt Peterson Motorsports this season. Once again, this was a second seat with lots of speculation over the off-season, as Michael Leschke, I thought did put a job in this seat last season alongside Simon Pagenaud. Unfortunately, had to vacate this seat due to US sanctions on Russia. You couldn't get his SMP sponsorship to, of course, pay for this seat. And we saw the likes of Davide Valsecchi and Conor Daly test for this seat. And we also saw James Jakes test for this seat and finally get this seat as well. As the Englishman who had an okay Feeder Series record in Europe, finished 5th in the F3 Euro Series with Mano in 2007, got a few podiums in GP3 in 2010, came over to the IndyCar Series in 2011 with Delcoin Racing, and in 2012 he raced for Delcoin and only finished 22nd in the standings with them and was very much overshadowed by his teammate Justin Wilson. But then in 2013 he went to the Rahal Lemon Racing, and again a team that was kind of struggling, but he did improve a bit. He finished 19th overall in the standings and got his only podium in the IndyCar Series with the second place finish at the second race in Detroit that season. And he was away for 2014 but has come back in 2015 with this seat, and I'm not expecting much from him, as frankly I kind of remembered his Acorn sponsorship more than his driving in previous seasons. But I do expect him to do quite well, get the odd top 10 maybe, even surprised with a top 5 maybe, like he did with Rahal and Anagon. But in general I expect him to finish lower down of the full-time drivers in this series this season. So yeah, not much expectation for Jakes, and I would have really hoped to have seen Conor Daly alongside Hinchcliffe, the dream team as many would say, and maybe even Valsecchi as well, someone who's got a bit to prove as a GP2 series champion who hasn't done much since winning that championship. But yeah, Jakes in the end, he has the funding and he got the seat. And for Schmidt Peterson Motorsports, I don't expect them to retain that high standard that they achieved with Simon Pagenaud in recent years. I expect them to drop back a bit with Hinchcliffe in that number 1 seat, and of course Jakes in the other seat. I do expect some things from Hinchcliffe, maybe the odd podium, maybe not challenging for wins, but the top 5s, the top 10s, and hopefully being a bit more consistent than he could manage at Andretti Autosport. But as I said, in general for Schmidt Peterson Motorsports, this is a very different team from last year, a different ensemble at the top, and of course a different drivers as well. And of course I really did hope to see, say, like Conor Daly or Davide Valsecchi in that second seat, but in the end we got James Jakes, a very nice guy he seems, and hopefully he can get a few results in that seat this season. But there are 5 more teams to talk about, and we're going to start with the big merger of this off-season, CFH Racing. So the last Chevrolet team we are going to be looking at is Carpenter Fisher Hartman Racing, a amalgamation, a merging of Carpenter Racing from last season and Sarah Fisher Hartman Racing, and they have their workshops in Indianapolis, not far from the Motor Speedway. So Carpenter is the only owner driver on the grid, and he has been very strong on the ovals in recent years. He is always someone who can look for to be a favourite for the Indy 500, and indeed he's qualified on pole for the Indy 500 the past couple of seasons. He got a win in Texas last year, he won in Fontana in 2012, and he is just a very strong oval driver who will always challenge for a win, it seems, on whatever oval he's driving for. And so in the 6 oval rounds he's going to be driving the 20 car, and sharing that car this season is not Mike Conway like last year. Conway is now a full-time Toyota driver in the World Endurance Championship. In his place we have got Luca Filippi, who's been flirting around at the IndyCar series for quite a few seasons now, but has now finally got his chance. The 2011 GP2 and AutoGP runner-up has, his career was kind of stagnating in the European Feeder Series. He was in GP2 for, I believe, 6 seasons, for God's sake. That's how long he was just stuck there. And so for Filippi, this series is proven to be another example of a chance for a fresh start in his career, and it certainly has been for him. With Barracuda Racing in 2013, had a couple of outings, looked very impressive in Houston that year, got a top 10 finish, and then last year with Ray Hall at Menangan Racing, got a couple of outings in Houston and Toronto, and while he was very fast, he couldn't really buy a result. Unfortunately, his races didn't end well. But now he's definitely got his chance in the IndyCar Series. Has a bit of more of a regular ride. He's got 10 rounds on the road and street courses to prove how good he is, and he'll be up against direct GP2 competition in Stefano Coletti in the KV racing car. So he's got some nice European competition there, and he can really show his worth in a more regular outing in the IndyCar Series. And I'm very excited to see what he can do, as he has shown a bit on his IndyCar outings previously. As I said, he showed great pace in Houston, in particular in his previous outings, even though he didn't quite get the results that pace deserved. And so I'm looking for him to continue Mike Conway's superb work in that seat on the road and street courses. Maybe not getting the wins that Conway could get last year, but maybe getting some top 5 results, getting some top 10 results in particular on that side. And of course, as I said, for Carpenter, look for him to challenge for wins on almost every oval race he's going to do, all 6 of them this season. And from the Sir Fisher Hartman Racing stable, we have Joseph Newgarden, the young American, one of the fresh faces of the IndyCar Series, along with James Hinchcliffe and of course Sage Karam maybe in the future. And the young American has been in the series for 3 years now with Sir Fisher Hartman Racing, after winning the Indy Lights title in 2011, and before then he actually had a go in Europe in GP3 in 2010. But with Sir Fisher Hartman Racing, he has just been building up and been getting better in this single car team he's been with. In 2012 he couldn't buy a top 10 result, but he showed a pace on occasion. 2013 he started getting those top 10 results, even the odd top 5, such as a podium in Baltimore. And then last year, he, in particular in the second half of the season, he just started racking up the results and being fast everywhere, on the ovals, on the road and street courses as well, and particularly highlighted by his run at Iowa on the way to second place, with those crazy last few laps just going past people like it was Mario Kart. And he maybe should have even challenged for the victory in Mid-Ohio if he wasn't let down by his team in a pit stop. So for Joseph Newgarden, this is a guy on the rise, a guy ready to win in the IndyCar Series, just like we saw with Charlie Kimball, with James Hinchcliffe a couple of years ago. Now this is the start of the younger guys than them, the start of the guys that we expect to see in the series for maybe even 10 or 15 years now. Has Newgarden is still only 24 and he's already got 3 years worth of IndyCar Series experience behind him. And now for this season, for the first time in his IndyCar Series career, he's got a teammate. And what better driver to learn from for oval racing than Ed Carpenter? And from the road racing and street course, he's got a great guy in Luca Filippi to learn from, who's only really done that in his career. And so for Joseph Newgarden, this could be a year where he maybe breaks out a bit more and does get that win that I really do hope he gets, and gets more podiums, gets more top 5s and top 10s. And of course it depends on how well this kind of merging works this season. Of course it's all new for Sir Fisher Hartman Racing and Ed Carpenter Racing to be working together of course this season, and it'll be interesting to see how this merger works. But I am expecting quite a few things from Joseph Newgarden this season, not least that win. I really do hope he finally gets that win. So this is one of the most interesting teams on the grid. As I said, these are 2 single car teams that have merged together to, I believe, have a stronger partnership. And of course for Newgarden, he's going to be stronger this year, but just because he has a teammate alongside him for the full season, and particularly learning the overs from Ed Carpenter. He's been qualifying well in the Indy 500 in recent years, Newgarden, but now he can maybe back that up with a strong race result as well. And on the road and street courses, of course, with Filippi, who's been very strong on that side, he's got another strong guy to learn from there. And so for this partnership this season, I do expect some things from them. I do expect the odd victory maybe, particularly on the oval side, but in general we're just kind of not sure about them. As I said, there's a new partnership, we're not sure what to get from them, but I do have high hopes for them, and particularly for Newgarden to get that first victory. I do believe he can sneak it somewhere. If only it just all falls together in one race, I do believe he can finally get it, as he looked like he was getting the middle higher last year until, as I said, that dodgy pit stop. But yeah, but that's the last Chevrolet team to look at. Now we've all got some Honda teams to look up, and teams that have really actually struggled. Almost all of them have struggled in the recent past and are looking to make a step up again to being, getting more podiums, more top fives and more top tens, starting with AJ Foyt Racing. So AJ Foyt Racing, or Enterprise, is of course owned by the legendary AJ Foyt, but kind of run by Larry Foyt, his son, and in recent years they've started showing some pace, after kind of dormant years in the kind of mid thousands of the IndyCar series. But with Sato at the helm, they of course won in Long Beach in 2013, and they were running really well in the first half of that season, didn't just fell off the face of the earth in the second half of the season. And with 2014 they started off in perfect fashion with a pole position at St. Petersburg, and again we were kind of expecting more results from them. They got another pole in the second race at Detroit, but the results were just not coming for them in the first half of the season. And it wasn't really until the last third of the season that results came. They got top 5 in Toronto, top 5 in Sonoma, and finishing 6th in Fontana. So for AJ Foyt Racing and for Takuma Sato, results are the name of the game. And be honest, I didn't really expect Sato to return this season after that dreadful season. He finished 18th in the standings, only got results in the last minute. But maybe his connections to Honda, strong connections for over a decade now, maybe helped him retain his seat. And of course with the Honda Aerokits, of course they'd be key for his experience, to develop them. Sato probably wouldn't like to admit it, but he's closer to 40 than we expected really. He's 38 now, so he's a very experienced campaigner, in F1 previously and in the IndyCar series now. He's with his third season with Foyt. We expect things from him now. We expect him, to get top tens and really help push this team forward instead of helping it come backwards, it seemed, last year. So for Sato, this is his make or break year in IndyCar. If he has another dreadful year like he had last year, he probably won't be back in 2016, I feel. He maybe, he's teared up too much, too much cars for, AJ Foyt to like, and that may be too much, to keep him on. But as I said last, he did show some pace on occasion, particularly in Houston as well. He was just unlucky. Mikael Leishkin didn't know how to get lapped in the first race of Houston, which took him out. Goddamn idiots everywhere, as AJ Foyt said. So for Sato, he definitely has the pace, but it's just the inconsistency which has just chased him round in IndyCar like it's attached to his back or something. He just can't get rid of it. And so he just needs to get some more results, solid results on the board all across the board. Maybe not top 10s all the time, but top 15, top 10s, just build up results and hopefully, be a bit more consistent this year. That's what we just ask for, Sato. Just consistency. It's been years and waiting. You show us pace on occasion, but just don't back it up somehow with mechanical gremlins, or just get taken out, or just going for a spin for no reason. It's always something with Sato, it seems, in a race. Hopefully it can finally just come together in a few races in a row. That's all I ask for, Sato. Just a few consistent results in a row. I've been following you since F3 when you had that dominant year, winning the title. Then in F1 you just, you went a bit silly on occasion. The consistency wasn't there. Then you built your reputation with Super Aguri. Now you've gone down again in IndyCar and you keep going up and down, like a yo-yo. I just want consistent results, Sato. I'm begging, Sato. And alongside Sato, an expanded AJ Foyt team this season from one car last year to two. We had the likes of Conor Daly linked to the seat, which seat has Conor Daly not been linked to this past off-season. But in the end, Jack Hawksworth got the seat. The young Briton who was with Brian Herter Autosport last season in his rookie year. As the 24-year-old was the Star Mazda champion in 2012, and in Indy Lights in 2013 he was very strong on the road and street courses, but his oval racing kind of let him down in that title fight as he finished 4th in the standings. And in 2014 he didn't really show much on the ovals. He qualified quite well for the Indy 500 and he got 10th in the Milwaukee Mile near the end of the season. But unfortunately he had that devastating crash at Pocono in practice, which didn't mean he could start that race. But it was on the street courses in particular that he showed his stuff, as on the road courses he
had that fantastic run at the Grand Prix of Indianapolis, qualified high up and led for most of the race before strategy meant he just dropped down the order to 7th in the end. But it was at the doubleheader at Houston in particular where he was strongest, as he finished 6th in the first race, then grabbed a podium in that second race as he fended off the likes of Pablo Montoya behind him for almost like half the race, I believe. It was fantastic defending, textbook defending from such a young driver as well, a rookie driver in the IndyCar series. And so, very strong performance from him. He also finished 6th in Toronto in one of the races, so he's very strong in the street courses in particular, and I expect him to show that again in 2015, maybe getting the odd top 5, but particularly getting top 10s. And on the road courses as well, maybe you can see a top 10 from him again, particularly again at Indianapolis. But it's the ovals where he needs, the most work in his repertoire, and he's got Sato to learn from, a guy who seems to have adapted to the ovals finally, and even though he doesn't seem to finish consistently on them. Hopefully Hawksworth doesn't have that problem this season. He can get some oval mileage under his belt and, build up the finishes on that, build up the confidence on the ovals, and maybe get the odd top 10 such as he got in Milwaukee. But for Hawksworth, it's a new challenge for him with a teammate alongside him this season after being with the single car Brian Herter Autosport team last year. So he's got a teammate to learn from, and he's got a very experienced team owner in AJ Foyt to learn from as well, with all of that knowledge from over 60 years of racing. So for Jack Hawksworth, it's a new challenge for him, but it's a very good new challenge for him all the same. It's just a shame in recent years AJ Foyt haven't been able to find the consistency key. I do like the team, and I like my characters in motorsport, and AJ Foyt is definitely a character, and so is Takuma Sato, even if sometimes it is unintended. But I do like this team. I just want them to have some success, more success like Long Beach in 2013, more poles like at St. Petersburg and Detroit last year. I just want them to get more results on the board this season. Is that too much to ask for? And another team I like to see more results from this season is Delcoin Racing. In any motor racing series, there always seems to be a chip in the chair team, a team that's never good on funds but always turns up every year. And in the IndyCar series, that team is Delcoin Racing. Been going for over a quarter of a century, and it's the team that you always root for to do well, a bit like say Minardi was in F1 or say Manu Marussia nowadays. And for Delcoin, they have been punching above their rate in recent years, particularly with Justin Wilson, and they got a win in Texas in 2012, and they got a win last year as well in Houston in an incredibly fluky win, but it was one of the rare times that they actually got a result last year as well for Delcoin. They just fell off the face of the earth, form-wise. In 2013, they actually finished in the top 10 in the driver's standings with Justin Wilson. They really built on a platform and really improving year on year. And then last year, it just fell down and collapsed a bit as Wilson only managed 15th in the standings, and Carlos Hertas, their rookie, only managed 20th in the standings. And for this season, Hertas is retained in a very surprising move, in my view, as the Colombian, he was a decent driver in junior Formula in Europe, won a race in Formula Renault 3.5 in 2013. But last year in his rookie year, he didn't really show much. He did get a top 10 in Long Beach, but that's mainly due to Ryan Hunter-Reay taking out half the field. And then he got a top 10 in Detroit, along with Wilson, who got a top 5 in the only strong showing for Delcoin for both cars in the race, the only strong result for both cars in the race. And then he got that win in Houston, as I said, a very fluky win. It was all about strategy and all about saving fuel. His teammate Wilson couldn't do that, but he could, because he had an unusually large fuel tank and rear wing infringement, and the team and driver got fined $5,000 for that, but they managed to keep the win. And that's the second win in a row, Delcoin, with an illegal car. You did it at Texas 2012 with Wilson. I remember. This time, illegal car all the time, Delcoin. None of this large fuel tank business and stuff. But for Hertas, he just didn't show much apart from those results on the street courses, and that was mainly just due to luck. and particularly on the ovals, he was just out of his depth and struggling. He was so much slower than everyone else. He was on a different planet, speed-wise, but on numerous occasions he retired early in races. He just could not get used to the constant G on the neck and just driving around ovals, it seemed. And so it's very surprising to see him back, and very, very surprising to see him have a full-time schedule, it seems, as well. So for Herta, one of 4 Colombians on the grid, and that's the second most for nationality behind America, with 6 drivers on the grid. For Herta, not expecting much at all. Maybe the odd top 10 if he's lucky, but yeah, for Herta, I'm just wondering why he's back on the grid. I'm guessing it has to do with, that stuff. As I said, chip in the chair team. And alongside Carlos Herta at Delcoin this season isn't Justin Wilson. Unfortunately, it looks like Delcoin couldn't afford to keep on the Englishman, and he's stuck in the IndyCar Series wilderness. I bet that's not for long. Instead, we have the definition that sometimes money is much more important than talent in this business. For the first 4 rounds, we see Francesco Giacconi in that second Delcoin seat. The 31-year-old Italian has driven an IndyCar previously back in 2010 for Conquest Racing. He finished 22nd at Mid-Ohio and 20th at Sonoma in his 2 appearances that year. Since then, he's driven in the Auto GP Championship in Europe, and that's despite not being a series regular though in the past couple of years. And during that time, he hasn't got a friggin' top 5 finish on his resume. His best finish is 6th in a couple of rounds last year. His best championship finish is 13th overall last year. Even Giuseppe Cipriani, the 49-year-old Italian who seems to crash more than keep it on the track, even he's got a freaking podium in this series. This guy's the definition of useless. And he's even taking the piss out of Carmen Georgia for getting the Lotus Development driver role. Well, mate, look in the mirror. Do you know what ironic is? Unfortunately for Delcoin, it looks like they're going to continue their slide to the back of the field this season. As I said, I don't expect much from the drivers at all, and hopefully we will see a good rotation of drivers in that second seat. Drivers more deserving of an IndyCar Series drive. So we've looked at a couple of teams who are hoping to bounce back from a disappointing 2014, but we're looking at a very solid midfield team from last year though. A single car team as well, with a respectable driver in their only seat, and that is Bryan Herta Autosport. So the penultimate team we're going to cover are Bryan Herta Autosport, run by former kart and IndyCar driver Bryan Herta. And since he's gone full time with this IndyCar Series team in 2012, it's been a very up and down experience for him. I mean, in his second outing with the team in 2011, he won the Indy 500 with the late Dan Weldon. I mean, it gets very hard to match that. But in 2012, after they switched from the Lotus unit to the Honda engine, they looked very promising with Alex Tagliani. Unfortunately, he couldn't buy a result in 2013, and they had much more success with Luca Filippi and J.R. Hildebrand in that car. And then last year in 2014, he took a gamble with Jack Hawksworth, very impressed with the Englishman in testing, and it certainly paid off in parts. He did show some promise, particularly on the street courses. And again in 2015, Bryan Herta Autosport go with a young guy, go with the reigning Indy Lights champion, Gabby Chaves, one of 4 Colombians on the grid. And Chaves is another guy who came from Europe in 2011. He was in the GP3 Championship before coming over to the Star Mazda Championship in 2012. He finished runner-up to his old adversary, Jack Hawksworth. And in 2013, he finished runner-up in the Indy Lights Championship to Sage Karam. But it was last year he grabbed the title. He was the one winning that title with 547 points, 4 wins, 11 podiums out of 14 races. Unfortunately for him, Jack Harvey also had 547 points. But the Englishman had less second place finishes, only 1 to Chaves' 5, so the Colombian grabbed the title with Bilardi Auto Racing. And so he steps up to IndyCar Series in 2015 with Bryan Herta Autosport on a single car team. Always tough for a rookie, as Hawksworth showed in parts last year.
So if Chavez can do kind of what Hawksworth did, get the odd result, get the odd top 10, maybe even a top 5 or podium if he's lucky, I think that would be a good season for him, just to learn what IndyCar is like. He seems a bit more able on the ovals than Hawksworth was, so maybe we could look for the odd top 10 from him on that. But yeah, for Chavez, it will be a learning year with the team, and hopefully he can, grow as a driver as the season goes on. That's what you're looking for in a rookie driver. Maybe cutting out the mistakes as the season goes on, getting more results and getting to the finishes of races more as the season goes on. So don't expect him to be, up there in the top 10 in the championship, in the Drivers' Championship, or even top 15. But look out for Chavez. He's perhaps one for the future and another young Colombian to keep an eye on. And for Brian Herter, Autosport in general, not much has changed with the team apart from having another young driver in that seat. So, yeah, again, don't expect him to, always be up there, but look out for him occasionally to, get an odd result and maybe surprise you as well. So there's one more team to cover, and it's a team that has been extremely disappointing in recent years. One of my favourite teams actually in the American Le Mans series when they ran the BMWs, and they run the BMWs still in the United Sports Car Championship. But in IndyCar in recent years, Rahal and Lanigan Racing has just been disappointing, and even more disappointing. For Rahal and Lanigan Racing, they probably hit their lowest point in their IndyCar Series career last year. Their sole full-time driver, Graham Rahal, could only finish 19th in the standings out of 21 full-time drivers. His best result was a second in Detroit, but apart from that, there was the few top 10 finishes, the odd occasion of pace showing, but just nothing concrete throughout the whole of the season. There always seemed to be issues or something going on. And especially last year, they had a technical shake-up. They brought in some people to help the team progress from a disappointing 2013 season. If anything else, it just made it worse, it seemed, last year, as they just struggled like a hell. And it didn't help Rahal's case that he was getting shown up by Oil Serbia and Luca Filippi when they had their few drives in the second car. So for Graham Rahal, the 26-year-old, the son of the Bobby Rahal, the team owner, this is an important year for him. It's a long time since he won in 2008 in his first IndyCar race in St. Petersburg as a 19-year-old with Newman Haas Lanigan Racing. He is now 26. It's 7 years ago now. He has got to start showing some results. He has got to start improving in his family team here. Because like Marco Andretti, we expected more from these, young Americans with the famous surname. We actually expected more wins, more podiums, more results. And we Rahal got that on occasion with Chip Ganassi in 2011, 2012. But since he's joined his father's team, he has finished 18th and 19th in the drivers' standings, with only a couple of podiums to show. So for this season, he's got to start showing some more results, more consistency. He's got to start racking up top 10s. He's got to start showing some pace, as it seems on occasion when he was at Chip Ganassi, he did have pace on occasion. He just couldn't get to the finish line and win. Now he's got to get to the finish line and score points, it seems. He's just gone backwards, the expectations of Graham Rahal. And that is very disappointing to see, as I was kind of a fan of him when he came around when he was an 18, 19-year-old. He seemed to have something about him. He wasn't as good as Bourdais in Newman Haas, back in 2007 in Champ Car, but he was getting some results, it seems. He drove for Lebanon in the A1 GP, I remember, and he was okay in that. And then he started off his IndyCar career, as I said, with a win. So, expectations were high for him, and he's never really quite delivered on them. And in 2015, my expectations are probably the lowest they've ever been for Graham Rahal, and that is just, maybe he'll get a couple of top 5s, I hope, but hopefully he'll get more top 10s. That's what I'm seeing from him. And hope for the team in general, the technical reshuffle they've been going through, it seems, that hopefully that will, hopefully the changes will improve them this year. I don't think they can get much worse in 2015. At least they got a nice looking livery, it seems, from their new sponsor. It is a very fetching car, it seems. So
hopefully if delivery means that it's fast, it can be fast on the track as well for Rahal and for Rahal Letterman good racing. I really do hope Graham Rahal shows something this season on more than one occasion. Hopefully it's on a few occasions. Hopefully it's on the street course, on the road course. He really wrangles this thing and really gets those results, because he really does need it this year. And the final drivers in the Qatar, the confirmed Indy 500 one-off appearances for this season, starting off with the Lazier Partners Racing buddy. Lazier, a popular member of the paddock it seems, the IndyCar veteran, the 1996 Indy 500 champion and 2000 IndyCar Series champion, has for the past couple of seasons run in the Indy 500 with his family team. Unfortunately, in the past two Indy 500s, they have run into mechanical issues before they can get past the 50 lap mark of the race. So hopefully this year they won't run into many issues and they will get past that 50 lap mark and maybe even make it to the finish. And then there's Brian Clausen, who was perhaps best remembered as the figurehead during Randy Bernard's tenure as IndyCar Series chief, for his push to bring USAC drivers back on the IndyCar path, get them back to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and competing in the Indy 500 rather than going down this NASCAR route, which Clausen looked like he was going down back in 2007 and 2008 when he took part in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and drove a number of races there in the second tier of NASCAR. But then he went back to his roots with USAC, became a multiple champion in the midgets and national champion, and he drove in the Indy Lights in 2011 on the ovals for Sam Schmidt Motorsport. He even grabbed pole at the Freedom 100 and finished in the top 5 or 4 of his 6 outings. He also drove in a couple of races for Fan Force United in 2012, as well as the Indy 500 for Sarah Fisher Hartman Racing. Unfortunately, his race ended early. He had a number of issues in that Indy 500 outing, but he is back for 2015 with Jonathan Bird Racing in conjunction with KVSH Racing Technologies, and so we are hoping to see Clausen do a bit better than he did in 2012, but it is just fantastic to see a driver of his like back in IndyCar racing, back at the Indianapolis 500 attempting the famous race. I'm hoping to see him, a good race for him will probably be a finish, hopefully not running into as many issues as he did back in 2012 and just finishing the race. But as I say, it's just fantastic to see a driver like him back attempting the Indy 500. And as the sun sets on me, I've still got one Indy 500 entrant to talk about, and that is Jay Howard. Has the 2006 Indy Lights champion with Sam Schmidt Motorsports has found it hard to find a regular gig in IndyCar since he stepped up, which is a problem that faces so many Indy Lights champions. And he first stepped up to IndyCar back in 2008 with Roth Racing, a team run by Marty Roth, a rich Canadian who was more known for his money than his driving skills. So Jay Howard, of course, kind of struggled in that team, but he got his best IndyCar Series finishes with a 13th at Montega and 13th at Kansas that year. Then he came back in 2010 with Sarah Fisher Racing, drove at Kansas, Texas and the Indy 500. Unfortunately, he didn't qualify for the Indy 500 as he withdrew his qualifying time and couldn't successfully re-qualify. And then in 2011 he came back with Sam Schmidt Motorsports and drove at Indy and in Texas, and he had his only assault at the Indy 500 that year, driving in the race, qualifying in 20th, and was running very high up until he had a problem with his right rear tyre at a pit stop. Unfortunately, that ended his race in 30th after that. And for Howard, he was meant to drive in the 2012 Indy 500 as well with Mike Shank. Unfortunately, they couldn't get an engine release for Chevrolet or Honda engine, as Jay Howard did have the full sponsorship to take part in that Indy 500. Unfortunately, they just couldn't find an engine. And so he's back after 3 years of grafting, getting sponsorship with Brian Herter Autosport for another assault on the Indy 500. And hopefully it goes a bit better than it has previously for him. He hasn't finished well, of course, in his only wheel attempt at the race, but he did qualify quite well on 20th. If he does a similar result, qualifying quite well and then just finishing the race, I think like all of the one-off Indy 500 engines, if they just finish the race, I think that would be good for them, as I don't expect them to fight for the win or the podium or the top 5 or top 10. But then again, the Indy 500 has over the years surprised us many times, and it could again in 2015 with the 99th running of it. So yeah, just for the one-off engines, just hopefully finishing this great race.
Well, there you go, the 2015 season, all the teams, the drivers, the calendar, and a couple of the rule changes as well. And let me know in the comments section below, who do you think will win the 2015 IndyCar Series crown? Will Power retain it, or will one of his Penske teammates such as Pagenaud steal that crown from him? Who will win the development war in the Aerokit battle between Honda and Chevrolet? Will the order get messed up a bit? Will the racing get less exciting, turn to more of a strategy war rather than the passing out on track which we so much enjoyed the past few years in this DW12 here? Just let me know down below, and I will be back with a gameplay video probably. It's been quite a long time on this channel since I've had some gameplay on, so thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.